Paul knelt in the corner of the kitchen, his breath shaky as he pressed his lips together to stifle a sob. His back was on fire, the stain of the hot water Sarah had thrown at him leaving an angry red mark. "This is what you get for being useless," she spat, her voice dripping with venom. The metal pot clanged as she dropped it onto the stove. She didn't even care that she'd just burned him. To her, Paul was little more than a nuisance. "I lived next door, and for years, I watched it all unfold from my window, my heart sinking each time." Paul was just 12 when his father married Sarah. His mother had died years before, and after some time, his father decided it was time to remarry. Sarah seemed nice at first. She was well dressed, always smiling when she spoke to the neighbors. But the moment she moved into their house, her true colors came out. At first, it was subtle, the way she'd send Paul to run errands for hours on end while she sat comfortably in the house. Then, it escalated. If the water he fetched wasn't enough, she'd hit him with whatever was nearby. If the compound wasn't swept to her standards, she'd make him redo it in the hot sun, no matter how tired he was. His father worked long hours and was hardly home, so he never really saw what was happening. Or maybe he chose to ignore it. Either way, Paul was left at the mercy of Sarah. There was one night I will never forget. It was raining heavily, one of those Lego storms that seemed to shake the ground itself. I was about to close my window when I noticed something. Sitting by the gate of their house, drenched from head to toe, was Paul. His shoulders were hunched, and he was shivering uncontrollably. Sarah had locked him out again. This time, his crime was forgetting to iron one of her wrappers. I watched in silence, helpless. What could I do? People in the neighborhood whispered about the way Sarah treated Paul, but no one dared confront her. She had a sharp tongue and a bad temper, and nobody wanted to cross her. Despite everything, Paul never fought back. He just kept enduring it. He'd wake up before dawn, fetch water, sweep the compound, prepare food for Sarah, and still go to school. School was the only place where he seemed happy. He was smart, and his teachers noticed it too. They'd encourage him, telling him he had a bright future. But Sarah didn't care about that. When he finished secondary school, she tried to stop him from going further. "There's no money to waste on your education," she said one day, waving off his request to apply for university. "Go and learn a trade like every other boy. This your book won't put food on the table." But Paul was determined. He wasn't going to let her stop him. He applied for scholarships and worked odd jobs after school, anything to keep his dream alive. He wasn't looking for anyone's approval anymore, especially not hers. The next time he came home for the holidays, I saw the changes in him. He looked tired, worn out from juggling school and work, but there was a fire in his eyes. He was focused, determined to rise above the life Sarah had forced on him. Years passed, and one day, I heard the news that Paul had graduated with top honors from university. He had landed a job with a big construction company in Lagos, and within months, he was already making good money. The same neighbors who once pitied him now spoke of him with admiration. "Oh, that boy worked hard. See how God has blessed him," they'd say. Sarah, who had spent years treating him like dirt, started to boast about her stepson. "My son is working in Lagos now," she'd say proudly to anyone who would listen. She acted as if she had always been there for him, as if she had supported him all along. It made my blood boil to hear her take credit for his success, but I never said anything. Paul, to my surprise, didn't hold a grudge. In fact, he came back to visit her a few times, always with gifts. He'd kneel in front of her, greet her respectfully, and thank her for everything, even though we all knew what everything meant. Sarah would smile and bless him, pretending she had been a loving mother. But her eyes told a different story. I could see the guilt creeping in, though she'd never admit it. The day Paul bought his own house was the day I realized just how much he had grown. He invited Sarah to come and see the place, and she went, of course, acting like the proud mother. I was there that day, standing by the gate, watching her enter the car he had bought for her. She looked so pleased with herself, like she had won some kind of prize. After they left, I found Paul sitting on the porch, looking out at the street. I couldn't hold it in any longer. I went over to him and asked, "Why do you still treat her like that? After everything she did to you? Why don't you just cut her off?" Paul smiled softly, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I don't have the heart to hate her," he said quietly. "She's still my father's wife. And besides, I'm at peace. Let her live with the burden of what she did. Me, I've moved on." That answer stayed with me. Paul had every right to be bitter, to hate her for all the pain she caused him, but he chose a different path. He chose to forgive, not because she deserved it, but because he deserved peace. And that's the lesson I took from Paul. Sometimes, the greatest strength isn't in fighting back or seeking revenge, it's in letting go.